Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favorite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside. I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. Let the story begin. London fog lay thick upon the city that autumn evening. At 221B Baker Street, Holmes sat idle, craving challenge. Then came the urgent knock at the door. Lord Harrington, found dead at his Mayfair mansion, shot through the head in his locked study, the priceless portrait of his ancestor gone from the wall. Scotland Yard saw a simple suicide amid financial ruin. The theft, a separate opportunist crime. But Holmes saw a link, the faint scent of turpentine on the frame, not from age but fresh tampering, one link in a chain that would bind a killer. The game is afoot. Chapter 1. The first link. I set down these events as they occurred in the autumn of 1892, when the thick London fog wrapped the city in a damp, choking embrace. At 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes had spent days in restless idleness, his Stradivarius violin untouched, the chemical apparatus on the table gathering dust amid scattered papers. The coal fire in the grate crackled weakly, sending faint warmth against the bitter chill that pressed through the window panes, where the yellow gaslight outside flickered like distant stars in the murk. Mrs. Hudson's familiar tread sounded on the 17 steps, followed by a firm knock. "A gentleman insists on seeing you at once, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice carrying the clean, sharp scent of carbolic soap from her morning scrubbing. Holmes straightened in his armchair, eyes gleaming with sudden interest as he set aside his cold pipe, the lingering aroma of strong tobacco still curling in the air. Inspector Lestrade entered, his rough tweed overcoat dripping fog moisture onto the carpet, bringing with it the heavy smells of coal smoke from the streets and the faint sour tang of Thames mud clinging to his boots. He removed his bowler hat and paced before the fire, the worn leather soles leaving slight dark marks. "A bad business, Holmes," he declared in his brisk professional tone. "Lord Harrington, dead in his locked study at Harrington House, Mayfair. Single bullet through the temple, his own revolver still in his hand. Door bolted from inside. Bag key found in his pocket. Scotland Yard sees suicide. Debts were crushing him, family troubles mounting, but the Reynolds portrait of his ancestor is missing from the wall, a theft worth thousands, on the same night." Holmes steepled his fingers beneath his chin and leaned forward. "Details, Lestrade. Everyone. The body's position, the room's state, the frame itself, data. The inspector obliged, describing the slumped form across the mahogany desk, blood pooling on blotter and papers, the empty gilt frame above the mantel with its hooks slightly askew, as though forced. Outside, foghorns moaned low along the river, mingling with the distant chime of Big Ben striking the hour. I poured steaming tea from the pot on the sideboard. Its bitter warmth spread across my tongue as the cold of the room nipped at my knuckles. Holmes listened intently, then rose. "We shall view the scene at once." The hansom cab rattled over slick cobblestones, wheels hissing through shallow puddles, the horses' hooves clopping steadily while rain began to tap against the roof like impatient fingers. Gas lamps glowed dimly through the fog, illuminating brief glimpses of muffled pedestrians and shuttered shop fronts. Harrington House emerged as a solid, imposing shape, its stone wet and black, the air thick with wet leaves, coal smoke from neighboring chimneys, and the ever-present damp rot of autumn. We were admitted to the study without delay. The fire had dwindled to glowing embers, crackling fitfully and casting long shadows across book-lined walls. The metallic scent of blood mingled with spent gunpowder and old leather bindings. That Lord Harrington's body had been removed to the morgue, but the desk still bore dark stains, and above it hung the bare frame, hooks glinting dully in the gaslight. Holmes paced rapidly before the mantel, coat-tails swinging, then stopped and pointed. "The first link, Watson. Observe the dust upon these hooks, recently disturbed, yet not evenly, tiny parallel scratches in the brass, as though a thin tool was inserted and levered." He dropped to one knee, fingers brushing the carpet's rough wool. "And here, a single flake of fresh turquoise paint, not aged oil from the Reynolds, but bright modern pigment. The forge begins. Such colour is common in picture restorers' studios, not among ordinary housebreakers. This was no random theft by a common cracksman." The room felt colder now, at the contrast sharp against the memory of our warm fire at Baker Street. Rain drummed harder on the tall windows, while constables' heavy footsteps thudded on the landing outside. Holmes rose, eyes alight. This observation connects directly to another. In the matter of the pilfered Pissarro, 1888, a forger substituted a copy and left identical flecks of restoration paint on the frame. He believed the substitution undetectable, yet the pigment betrayed both time and hand. The ground itself, Watson, the very surface underfoot, remembers every trespass. So here, the paint flake is no accident. It proclaims premeditation and expertise. Therefore, I concluded aloud, the death was staged to appear suicide, while the portrait's removal formed the true purpose. Murder masked as despair. The portrait the key, Holmes affirmed. The link forges strong. Did you see it form before I spoke, Watson? Or you, dear reader, did the turquoise speck catch your eye as the first link in the chain? Lestrade snorted from the doorway. Locked room, Holmes. No forced entry. Suicide plain as day. Holmes merely smiled faintly and turned back to the frame. We returned to Baker Street late. Rain still falling. The fog thicker than ever. The fire roared high again, its heat thawing our chilled limbs. I tasted sweet brandy from the decanter, its warmth spreading pleasantly, while the rough tweed of my coat dried slowly by the flames. Holmes reached for his Persian slipper, filling his pipe with fresh shag, the rich tobacco scent filling the room once more. We spoke of possible suspects: Reginald Harrington, the impatient heir; Lady Harrington, composed yet strained; Elias Thorne, and the art dealer who had long coveted the portrait; Clara Voss, the dismissed housemaid with a grudge; Dr. Simon Baxter, the family physician; and Victor Lang, the business partner entangled in failing ventures. "Links will multiply," Holmes murmured, drawing thoughtfully on his pipe. "But this first one, the paint, hints at artistry and deception." The fire crackled. Big Ben tolled again in the distance. What chain would you build from these few observations? The connection seems invisible at first glance. Can you see it? Holmes had already forged 3 links, where most would see only coincidence. How many did you spot? I reflected quietly. Holmes's powers never ceased to astonish me. Looking back, I should have noticed the paint flakes sooner. The scent of leather polish from the desk chair still clung to my memory, is smooth beneath my fingertips during examination. You, dear reader, may have already deduced the direction this chain will take. Evening deepened, rain lashing the panes. Holmes plucked a few idle notes on his violin, the strings vibrating softly. "Yeah, you know my methods, Watson. Observation is the foundation. Logic forges the chain." I nodded, sipping brandy, its sweetness lingering. The rough weave of the armchair pressed against my back. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps retreated below, the house settling into quiet. Tomorrow, the hunt would continue. The first link forged. The chain begins. Chapter 2. Forging Connections. As I continue this faithful record of the Harrington affair, the fog of that October week clung to London like a shroud, its damp chill finding every crack in even the stoutest walls. At 2:21, B. Baker Street, we breakfasted early. The comforting scent of Mrs. Hudson's grilled bacon mingling with the sharp, familiar aroma of Holmes's morning tobacco. The coal fire roared in the grate, its warmth pushing back the bitter cold that seeped through the window frames, while rain tapped insistently against the glass like impatient fingers. Holmes paced before the mantelpiece, coat-tails swinging, his boots soft on the worn carpet. "We must visit the principals today, Watson," he declared. "Links are forged in speech as surely as in observation. Each suspect will add a segment to the chain." I nodded, finishing my hot tea, its bitter edge still on my tongue, and we set out in a hansom cab, the wheels clattering over wet cobblestones, the horses' hooves splashing through shallow puddles. Our first call was Harrington House itself. The great doors opened to admit us, and Lady Harrington received us in the drawing-room. The air carried the faint floral trace of her perfume, overlaid by the smell of polished leather from the furniture and the low crackle of the fire. She sat, very upright, on a velvet sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap, the smooth silk of her morning dress catching the gaslight. "My husband was deeply troubled by his debts," she said in a low, controlled voice. "The portrait, he loved it above all things. Yet, perhaps in desperation, he sold it secretly." Holmes studied her face. "When did you last see the picture hanging intact?" She answered that it had been there the previous evening when she retired. She had dined alone, hearing nothing unusual, save the distant foghorns from the river and the rain on the roof. When I noticed her fingers tremble slightly as she smoothed the rough lace at her cuff. The next hansom took us to Kensington, to the lodgings of Reginald Harrington, the son and heir. His sitting room smelled strongly of turpentine and stale pipe tobacco. An easel stood in the corner with a half-finished canvas, its surface still tacky. Reginald, a tall young man with restless eyes, paced as he spoke. Father's suicide was dreadful, but not unexpected. The estates were bleeding money. Holmes bent to examine a small paintbrush lying on the table, its bristles flecked with turquoise. "You work in oils, Mr. Harrington." Reginald admitted it was a hobby to pass idle hours. Holmes's gaze lingered on the young man's cuffs, also bearing faint turquoise traces. We paused for luncheon at a small chop house near Hyde Park Corner. The hot beef and ale warmed us against the chill, the bitter taste of the beer lingering as rain drummed on the window panes and footsteps hurried past outside. In the afternoon, we proceeded to Bond Street, to the gallery of Elias Thorne, the art dealer who had several times offered to purchase the Reynolds. The premises smelled of varnish, old canvas, and the faint coal smoke that drifted in whenever the door opened. Thorne, stout and smooth-voiced, greeted us with professional courtesy, smoothing the front of his waistcoat. "A tragedy, gentlemen. I would have paid handsomely for that portrait." Legitimately, of course. Holmes noted a fresh scratch across the back of Thorne's right hand, the skin raw as though scraped against metal. "A recent injury?" Thorne laughed it off as a clumsy moment with a frame earlier that day. His alibi, and he said, was solid. He had been at his club until well past midnight. Our fourth visit took us eastward to Whitechapel, where Clara Voss, the dismissed housemaid, lived in a narrow, soot-blackened terrace. The air here reeked of Thames mud, cheap coal fires, and wet laundry hanging in the courts. Miss Voss opened the door in a coarse apron, her face hard. "Dismissed for nothing more than a missing spoon. Lies, all of it," she snapped. Holmes's sharp eyes caught a crumpled telegram on the deal table beside the door, its paper damp from the fog that had seeped under the sill. "This message arrived recently." She flushed and snatched it away, but not before I glimpsed the words portrait and midnight. Evening found us at Dr. Simon Baxter's consulting rooms in Harley Street. The sharp, clean smell of carbolic filled the air, The glass vials and instruments gleamed coldly on shelves. Baxter, a thin, precise man, adjusted his spectacles. Lord Harrington suffered from melancholy. I prescribed sedatives, nothing more. Holmes lifted a small bottle labelled turpentine spirit for cleaning instruments. An unusual item for a physician's cabinet, Baxter explained. It was for stubborn stains on his hands after post-mortems. His alibi was impeccable. Attending a difficult confinement all that night, our final call was to Victor Lang's offices in the city. Fog had thickened again, gas lamps glowing like blurred moons. Lang's room smelled of brandy and old ledger books. His desk was scarred wood, papers scattered. Business was failing, yes, he admitted, voice rough. But Harrington took his own life. I had no hand in it. Holmes lifted a single canvas thread from the cuff of Lang's coat, holding it to the light. This fibre matches the backing of the stolen portrait. We returned to Baker Street as night deepened, the fire blazing high once more. I tasted sweet brandy from the tantalus, its warmth spreading through me while the rough tweed of my coat slowly dried. Holmes drew thoughtfully on his pipe, tobacco smoke curling toward the ceiling. Links multiply, Watson. Paint flecks, turquoise traces, a scratched hand, a furtive telegram, a canvas thread. Each observation forges another connection. The rain continued to lash the windows. Big Ben tolled distantly through the fog. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps sounded softly below as she retired. Holmes plucked a few idle notes on his violin, in the strings humming low. The chain takes shape before our eyes. What would you make of these fragments? Dear reader, did you spot the turquoise on Reginald's cuffs before I pointed it out? Or the significance of that telegram on Miss Voss's table? I reflected quietly. Watson missed several connections that day. Did you? The link seems invisible at first. Can you see it forming? Holmes had already seen 4 or 5 links where most would see only coincidence. How many did you spot? The fire crackled, the room warm against the bitter night outside. Tomorrow would bring more forging, links forging. The chain takes shape. Chapter 3. The chain grows. As I set down these further particulars of the Harrington mystery, the fog of that October week had grown denser still, blanketing London in a grey veil that muffled every sound and carried the perpetual reek of coal smoke and damp earth. At 221 B Baker Street, the coal fire burned steadily, its warmth a welcome contrast to the bitter chill outside, where rain hissed against the window panes and foghorns moaned low along the Thames. Holmes was in excellent spirits, pacing before the mantel with quick, energetic steps, his violin resting against the armchair, strings still vibrating faintly from an earlier impromptu air. "We returned to the scene this morning, Watson," he announced, drawing thoughtfully upon his pipe. "The study will yield more links now that our minds are attuned to the pattern." I agreed, finishing the last of my hot tea, its bitter taste lingering, and we descended the 17 steps to hail a hansom. The cab rattled over slick cobblestones, wheels splashing through puddles, the horse's breath steaming in the cold air as we made our way once more to Mayfair. Harrington House stood silent and imposing, its stone facade glistening with moisture. The study door creaked open under the butler's hand. Inside, the air still held traces of gunpowder and old leather, though the metallic tang of blood had faded somewhat. The fire had been relit, crackling softly, casting flickering shadows across the empty gilt frame above the mantel. Holmes immediately knelt beside the desk, fingers brushing the carpet's rough wool. "Observe this second link, Watson," he said, holding up a tiny clump of reddish mud flecked with coal dust. "This adheres to the underside of the desk's foot. Yet the carpet here is otherwise clean. Such soil is peculiar to the Whitechapel district, and where foundries and tanneries mingle their refuse. The forge is simple. No resident of Mayfair would carry this particular composition on his boots. An intruder entered from the east." He rose, eyes gleaming. "This connects directly to the paint flake we found yesterday." The chain grows. A restorer's pigment and Whitechapel mud together proclaim that our criminal is no ordinary thief, but one who moves between artistic circles and the meaner quarters of the city. I recalled a previous adventure. It reminds me of the Musgrave ritual case, I ventured. Holmes nodded vigorously. Precisely. In 87, Brunton the butler left identical reddish clay on the library carpet after his nocturnal excavations, earth from the estate's old ice house, yet the composition matched only one spot on the grounds. He believed the traces too small to matter. And the ground itself betrayed him, forging an unbreakable chain that led straight to the hidden crown and Brunton's fate. So here, the mud remembers the trespasser's path. Every step leaves its signature. Therefore, the death could not be suicide. An outsider had staged the scene after the murder, leaving these minute betrayals behind. The link forger's strong, Holmes concluded. Did you see this mud link form before I lifted it, Watson? Or you, dear reader? Did the reddish clay catch your notice as the second segment in our chain? We continued our examination. Holmes moved methodically along the walls, then paused beneath the window. A small brass latch showed fresh scratches, barely visible, yet unmistakable. Third link. The window was forced, though the shutters were closed afterward. The rain has washed the sill clean outside, but inside, a single damp newspaper fragment remains caught in the frame. Yesterday's edition. Folded small, used perhaps to muffle sound. Beneath the desk itself lay our most crucial discovery. A torn corner of a telegram, sodden from the night seepage through the ill-fitting sash. I read the fragment aloud. Trayton portrait. Midnight. Do not fail. The paper's texture was rough, ink slightly blurred by moisture. Holmes's eyes lit with triumph. Major leap, Watson. The portrait concealed something, a document, a will, a letter of credit, hidden behind the canvas or within the frame. The theft was not for the Reynolds' market value alone, but for what it guarded. Murder followed to silence the one man who knew the secret. The room felt colder now, the contrast sharp against the fire's glow. Outside, rain drummed steadily. Meek constables, heavy boots, thudded on the stairs as Lestrade arrived to confer. We visited the morgue briefly afterward. The chill there bit deep, the sharp carbolic scent overpowering, the slabs cold marble unyielding beneath gloved fingers. The wounds, powder burns, showed an angle inconsistent with self-infliction. The pistol had been held at a slight remove. Back at Baker Street by late afternoon, we took tea before the roaring fire. The hot liquid warmed my chilled hands. Its bitterness mingled with the sweet steam rising from the cup. Holmes paced, pipe in hand, tobacco smoke curling thickly. The chain grows stronger with each link. Paint, mud, telegram fragment, forced latch. Logic binds. What coincidence cannot explain. I reflected quietly. Holmes's powers never ceased to astonish me. Looking back, I should have connected the Whitechapel mud to the paint fleck sooner. The scent of damp newsprint still clung to my fingers from handling the telegram scrap. You, dear reader, may have already deduced the portrait's hidden purpose. Watson missed several connections today. Did you? The link was there, plain once pointed out. Did you forge it before Holmes? What chain would you build from these new observations? The mud, the telegram, the latch. The connection seems invisible at first. Can you see it now? Holmes had spotted 5 links, where most would see only disorder. How many did you spot? Evening deepened. Rain lashed the windows, Big Ben tolling distantly through the fog. Holmes plucked a few soft notes on his violin, the strings humming low against the crackle of the fire. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps sounded below as she carried away the tea tray. The house settled into quiet, yet the chain continued to lengthen in our minds. The chain grows stronger. Logic binds. Chapter 4. Testing the links. In continuing this journal of the Harrington case, I recall how the fog began at last. to thin. That week, though the bitter autumn chill remained, carried on every breath of damp wind and every puff of coal smoke from London's chimneys. At 221 B. Baker Street, the fire burned bright in the grate, its crackling warmth a steady comfort against the cold that still nipped at the window frames. Holmes was restless, pacing rapidly before the mantel, his coat-tails swinging as he reviewed the growing chain of evidence in his mind. "We must now test each link, Watson," he declared, drawing thoughtfully upon his pipe. "Some will hold firm under pressure, others will shatter like brittle iron. Only the true chain will remain." I finished my hot tea, its bitter edge still sharp on the tongue, and we set out once more in a hansom cab, the wheels clattering briskly over drying cobblestones, the horses' hooves ringing clear in the morning air. Our first test was at Reginald Harrington's Kensington lodgings. The sitting room still carried the strong scent of turpentine and fresh oil paint. The half-finished canvas on the easel gleamed wetly under the gaslight. Reginald received us with visible strain, his hands fidgeting at his sides. Holmes held up the small flake of turquoise paint we had found in the study. "This pigment matches none in your palette, yet traces appear on your cuffs. Explain." Reginald flushed. I visited a restorer's shop 2 days before Father's death. Curiosity about technique. Nothing more." Holmes pressed. "Your alibi for the night in question." The young man produced a club receipt, stamped at 11:30. Yet a club porter, when later questioned by telegram, recalled Reginald leaving at 10. The link bent, then snapped. Reginald's paint connection was mere coincidence, not complicity. We proceeded next to Harrington House to confront Lady Harrington in the drawing room. The velvet cushions felt smooth beneath us, the fire crackling low, her floral perfume faint against the scent of polished wood. Holmes laid the torn telegram fragment before her. "This speaks of a trait in portrait and a midnight meeting. You dined alone. You said, yet the household staff report you absent from the house between 10 and 1. She paled, fingers twisting the lace at her wrist. "I visited a friend in distress. Nothing more." Her tears came quickly, but her story held. The friend confirmed the visit by note. Motive existed, debts weighed heavily, but the midnight absence proved innocent. The link of suspicion held partially, yet did not break entirely. By midday, we reached Elias Thorne's Bond Street gallery. Varnish and old canvas scented the air. Gas lights hissed softly overhead. Thorne smoothed his waistcoat nervously as Holmes pointed to the fresh scratch on his hand. "This wound, sustained while forcing the study frame, perhaps." Thorne laughed too loudly. "A clumsy moment with a heavy gilt moulding yesterday afternoon. Ask my assistant." The assistant corroborated. Moreover, club records placed Thorne at cards until after 1. The scratched hand theory shattered cleanly. A red herring. Nothing more. We paused briefly at a chop house near Piccadilly. Hot roast beef and ale warmed us, the bitter taste of the drink cutting through the chill that clung to our coats. Rain had begun again, tapping steadily on the windows while footsteps hurried past outside. The afternoon brought us to Dr. Simon Baxter's Harley Street consulting rooms. Carbolic stung the nostrils. Glass vials gleamed coldly on the shelves. Holmes lifted the turpentine bottle once more. "You keep artists' materials in a physician's cabinet." Baxter adjusted his spectacles. "For cleaning stubborn stains after examinations." Nothing sinister. His night-long attendance at a confinement was verified by 3 independent witnesses: mother, nurse, and husband. The turpentine link broke utterly. Baxter stood clear. In Whitechapel, we found Clara Voss at home, the narrow room reeking of Thames mud and cheap coal. She glared as Holmes produced the telegram she had tried to conceal. "This midnight summons. Did you meet someone regarding the portrait?" She shook her head fiercely. That wire was from my sister in Birmingham. A portrait means her likeness, not your painting. See the date. The message, when fully examined, proved innocuous. Her grudge was real, her opportunity nil. The link shattered. Our final test came at Victor Lang's city offices as evening drew on. Fog was returning, gas lamps glowing hazy. The room smelled of brandy and old ledgers. Holmes held up the canvas thread from Lang's cuff. This matches the stolen portrait's backing precisely. Lang's face darkened. I handled the frame weeks ago when Harrington showed it me. Business courtesy. Yet, when pressed on his movements after 10 o'clock, his account faltered. A cabman later recalled setting him down near Mayfair at 11:30. The fibre held firm, a strong link, but motive and opportunity required still more proof. We returned to Baker Street as night fell. The fire roared high again. I tasted sweet brandy from the decanter, its warmth spreading through me while the rough tweed of my coat dried slowly. Holmes steepled his fingers beneath his chin, pipe smoke curling thickly toward the ceiling. Several links have shattered under test, Watson. Reginald's paint, Thorne's scratch, Voss's telegram, Baxter's turpentine. Yet others endure. The Whitechapel mud, the turquoise flake, the canvas thread on Lang's coat, the forced window latch. The true chain begins to emerge from the wreckage. The rain drummed on the panes. Big Ben tolled distantly through the fog. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps retreated below. Holmes plucked a few soft notes on his violin, the strings humming against the fire's crackle. You, dear reader, may have followed which links held and which broke. The weak ones shattered today. Did you spot which remained strong before Holmes named them? What chain would you now build from the survivors? The connection grows clearer. Can you see it? Holmes tested 6 theories and found only 3 that would not snap. How many did you correctly judge? The house settled into quiet. Tomorrow the chain would tighten further. Weak links shattered. The true chain emerges. Chapter 5. The chain tightens. As I record these next events in the Harrington mystery, the fog had begun to lift by degrees that week, though the raw autumn chill lingered in every gust, carrying the ever-present smell of coal smoke from 1,000 chimneys across London. At 221 B Baker Street, the fire roared in the grate, its crackling warmth a steady bulwark against the cold that still seeped through the window frames. Holmes stood before the mantel, pipe in hand, eyes gleaming with the peculiar light that always appeared when the end of a chase drew near. "The chain tightens now, Watson," he said, drawing thoughtfully on his pipe. "Victor Lang's canvas thread and his faltering alibi are strong links. We press him today and see if the rest holds." I nodded, finishing the last of my hot tea, its bitter warmth steadying me. And we descended the 17 steps to take a hansom cab. The wheels clattered briskly over the drying cobblestones, the horses' hooves ringing clear as we made straight for Lang's offices in the city. We arrived without appointment. The outer door stood ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of brandy, old ledger books, and the faint metallic tang of ink. Lang rose sharply from his desk as we entered, his face darkening. "What now, gentlemen? I have answered your questions." Holmes stepped forward, holding the canvas thread between thumb and forefinger so that it caught the gaslight. "This fibre, Mr. Lang, matches the backing of the stolen Reynolds precisely. You claim to have handled the frame weeks ago. Yet the thread is fresh, not frayed by time. And your cabman places you near Mayfair at 11:30 on the night in question." Lang's hand trembled as he reached for a glass of brandy. The liquid sloshed, its sharp aroma cutting through the room. "Coincidence," he muttered. "Many men take cabs in London." Holmes's voice grew quieter, more dangerous. "Coincidence does not explain the Whitechapel mud on boots found in your cloakroom closet, mud that matches the clump beneath the study desk. Nor does it explain the telegram fragment urging a midnight meeting over the trait-in portrait. You knew the secret hidden behind the canvas. A second document, perhaps a codicil, to the will that disinherited you as the illegitimate claimant you are. Lang's glass crashed to the floor, brandy splashing across the worn boards. For a moment he stood frozen. Then, with a sudden curse, he bolted for the side door. Holmes was after him in an instant. "The game is afoot," he cried. Only once in the entire affair did he utter those words, and they rang out like a pistol shot. We pursued through narrow passages, behind the offices, footsteps pounding on damp stone, the cold air biting at our faces. Rain had begun again, pattering on rooftops and sluicing down gutters. Lang darted into a fog-shrouded alley near the river. Foghorns moaned low from the Thames, mingling with the slap of our boots on wet cobbles. I stumbled once on a slick curb, the rough texture scraping my palm, but Holmes pulled me upright without breaking stride. Lang turned a corner toward the wharves. We followed, the smell of river mud and tar growing stronger. He glanced back, face pale in the gaslight. He then vaulted a low crate and sprinted along a narrow quay. Holmes lengthened his stride, coat flying. I labored behind, breath coming hard, the chill air burning my lungs. At the quay's end, Lang skidded to a halt, water lapped black and oily below. No escape save the river. He turned, chest heaving. "You cannot prove murder," he gasped. Holmes advanced slowly. "The chain is nearly complete. The portrait concealed the true will, your father's final correction, lodged secretly behind the canvas to thwart your claim. You arranged the midnight meeting, entered through the forced window, shot Lord Harrington at close range, arranged the pistol in his hand, and took the picture to destroy the document. The mud, the thread, the paint fleck from your restorer accomplice, all betray you." Lang laughed bitterly, and the sound echoing off the warehouse walls. "You think I acted alone? Thorn supplied the forger's touch, but no matter. You'll never hang me for it." He made one last feint toward the water. Holmes lunged, seizing his collar. I arrived panting, and together we restrained him as two patrolling constables, summoned by a whistle, came running along the quay, lanterns swinging. Back at Baker Street that evening, the fire blazed high once more. I tasted sweet brandy from the decanter, its warmth spreading through limbs still trembling from the chase, while the rough tweed of my coat dried slowly by the flames. Holmes paced before the hearth, pipe smoke curling thickly toward the ceiling. "The crucial link was the hidden codicil," he said. "It explains motive, method, everything. This parallels the speckled band affair. There, too, a deadly scheme was concealed in plain sight. The stepfather's contrivance unraveled by minute traces, a ventilator, a bell rope, a saucer of milk, observation, defeated deception, then as now. The chain binds, because no link can be overlooked." I reflected quietly. Holmes's powers never ceased to astonish me. Looking back, I should have seen the codicil's shadow earlier. The scent of river mud still clung faintly to my boots. You, dear reader, may have already deduced Lang's guilt from the surviving links. Watson missed the full shape until the chase. Did you? The link was there, forged in mud and thread. Did you see it tighten before Holmes named it? What chain would you build now that motive stands revealed? The connection grows unmistakable. Can you see it? Holmes had spotted 6 links by this hour. How many did you count? Before Holmes explains further, what does this final evidence tell you? The rain drummed softly on the panes. Big Ben tolled distantly through the thinning fog. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps sounded below as she retired for the night. The chain tightens. No escape now. Chapter 6. Links to the past. As I continue this faithful chronicle of the Harrington affair, the fog had at last begun to dissipate by the middle of that week, though the raw chill of late autumn still clung to every stone and every breath, borne on winds that carried the perpetual scent of coal smoke from the city's chimneys. At 221B Baker Street, the fire burned high and steady in the grate, its crackling warmth a constant companion against the cold that lingered outside the window panes. Holmes sat in his armchair, legs stretched toward the blaze, pipe in hand. The rich aroma of his shag tobacco mingling with the faint smell of damp newspaper he had spread across the table. "The past now speaks plainly, Watson," he said, drawing thoughtfully upon his pipe. "Victor Lang's flight and capture have secured the physical links. It remains to uncover the history that forged his motive. I have sent telegrams to the appropriate quarters, records of births, wills and certain discreet inquiries, and the chain will soon bind past to present." I nodded, sipping hot tea whose bitter edge steadied my nerves after the previous night's exertions, and we awaited the replies. The first telegram arrived before noon, delivered by a breathless boy whose damp cap left dark spots on the carpet. Holmes tore it open, eyes scanning rapidly. Lang was born in Whitechapel in 1858, not as Victor Lang, but as Victor Harrington, the illegitimate son of the late Lord's younger brother. The mother, a milliner's assistant, died in childbirth. The child was fostered quietly to avoid scandal. No formal acknowledgement ever came from the family. Holmes rose and paced before the fire, coattails swinging. Second telegram, due any moment, concerns the portrait itself. As if summoned, Mrs. Hudson's tread sounded on the stairs. She entered with another envelope, her hands still carrying the clean scent of carbolic from her morning work. Holmes read aloud. "The Reynolds canvas conceals a hidden pocket behind the inner stretcher bar. Standard practice among certain 18th century portraitists for private documents. Recent examination of duplicate records at the family solicitor's office confirms a codicil dated 1889, witnessed secretly, in disinheriting any issue not born in lawful wedlock and naming Reginald's sole heir." I felt the pieces locked together. Then, the portrait was not merely valuable. It was the hiding place of proof that would destroy Lang's claim to any inheritance. Holmes nodded. "Precisely. Lang discovered the codicil's existence, perhaps through a careless word from the late Lord during a business meeting, and arranged with a restorer to remove and destroy it. When Lord Harrington refused to sell or part with the picture, murder became the only path. The midnight meeting was to hand over the canvas. The shot followed when the victim resisted. We spent the afternoon at Scotland Yard with Lestrade, examining items recovered from Lang's lodgings after his arrest. The small back room smelled of dust, old leather, and the faint metallic tang of gun oil. On the table lay the stolen Reynolds itself, returned by the police after Lang had hidden it in a city warehouse, its gilt frame still bearing the tiny turquoise paint fleck and the parallel scratches from the pry bar. Holmes lifted the canvas gently. With a penknife, he eased back the stretcher bar, revealing a slim parchment folded tight within the hidden pocket. The document, yellowed but legible, bore the unmistakable signature of the late Lord Harrington and two witnesses, now deceased. "Here is the final link," Holmes murmured. "The codicil itself. Motive made manifest?" Lestrade whistled low. "You've bound him tight, Holmes. No jury will doubt this chain." Back at Baker Street as evening fell, the fire crackled warmly. I tasted sweet brandy from the decanter, its warmth spreading through me while the rough tweed of my coat dried by the flames. Holmes paced slowly, pipe smoke curling toward the ceiling. The past and present are now one unbroken chain. Lang's childhood grievance, denied legitimacy, denied fortune, grew into obsession. The portrait, meant to celebrate the family line, became the instrument of his revenge. Every link connects: the Whitechapel mud from his birthplace, the turquoise paint from his hired restorer, the canvas thread on his cuff, the telegram summoning him to the fatal meeting, the codicil hidden for a decade. This reminded me strongly of another case. "It echoes the Reigate Squires affair," I said. Holmes smiled faintly. "Indeed. There, too, family secrets lay at the root. The Cunninghams' forged will and their desperate attempt to conceal a murder. You're a torn paper fragment, a coat button, a handwriting discrepancy, all minute traces that forged an unbreakable chain. The elder Cunningham thought age and position would shield him, yet observation defeated deception, just as here. The ground, the canvas, the document, each remembers what men seek to forget. I reflected quietly. Holmes's powers never ceased to astonish me. Looking back, I should have seen how deeply the motive ran once the codicil was mentioned. The scent of old parchment still lingered on my fingers from handling the document. You, dear reader, may have already deduced the full shape of Lang's grievance. Watson missed the historical depth until the papers arrived. Did you? The link was there, forged in birth records and hidden ink. Did you see the past connect before Holmes named it? What chain would you build now that motive stands fully revealed? The connection is unmistakable. Can you see it? Holmes had traced 7 links back through time. How many did you count? Before Holmes explains further. What does this codicil tell you about the entire crime? The rain had ceased. Big Ben tolled distantly through the quiet night. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps retreated below as she locked up for the evening. The house settled into calm. Yet the chain remained taut, past and present, one unbroken chain. Chapter 7. The complete chain. As I commit these concluding events to paper, the late autumn light had begun to brighten London's streets by the final days of that memorable week, though the coal smoke still hung low and the chill lingered in every shadowed corner. At 221 B Baker Street, the fire burned with steady vigor. Its crackling warmth filling the room as Holmes prepared for the final act. He stood before the mantel, fingers steepled beneath his chin, eyes alight with quiet triumph. Tonight, the chain is presented entire, he said, every link accounted for. We gather all parties at Harrington House. There, before witnesses, I shall lay out the evidence link by link until no shadow of doubt remains. I nodded, the bitter taste of coffee still on my tongue from breakfast, and we set out in a hansom cab as dusk gathered, the wheels rumbling over cobblestones now dry after days of rain. Harrington House's drawing room was lit by gas jets and a roaring fire. The air carried the mingled scents of polished wood, floral perfume, and the faint metallic trace of gunpowder that seemed to cling to memory. Present were Lady Harrington, pale but composed in black silk, Reginald, restless yet hopeful, Elias Thorne, smoothing his waistcoat nervously, Clara Voss, arms folded defiantly, Dr. Baxter, spectacles glinting, and Victor Lang, brought under police escort, wrists lightly manacled, his face set in grim defiance. Inspector Lestrade stood near the door, notebook in hand, while 2 constables waited in the hall, their heavy boots audible on the marble. Holmes stepped to the center of the room, voice calm and measured. We begin with the physical evidence links. First, the turquoise paint flake on the frame hooks, modern restorer's pigment. Not from the Reynolds itself. This connects to the flecks on Mr. Lang's restorer contact in Whitechapel, whose workshop we have since inspected. A second, the clump of reddish clay mixed with coal dust beneath the study desk, soil unique to Whitechapel foundries, matching the mud scraped from Mr. Lang's boots recovered from his lodgings. Third, the single canvas thread adhering to Mr. Lang's cuff, identical in weave and dye to the portrait's backing. Fourth, the parallel scratches on the brass hooks and window latch, made by the same thin pry bar found hidden in Mr. Lang's coal cellar. Lang shifted, chains clinking softly, but said nothing. The fire crackled. Outside, a distant foghorn moaned. Next, the timeline links, Holmes continued. Lord Harrington was last seen alive at 10 o'clock by the butler. The shot was heard shortly after 11. A cabman places Mr. Lang near Mayfair at 11:30. The forced window latch shows entry between 10:30 and 11. But the telegram fragment, Trayton portrait, midnight, fixes the intended meeting time, though murder came sooner when resistance arose. Lady Harrington drew a sharp breath. Reginald leaned forward intently. Witness links follow. Miss Voss saw a tall shadow leave by the garden gate near midnight, height and build consistent with Mr. Lang. Dr. Baxter, passing the house on his way from a late call, heard the shot at 11:15 and noted the study window ajar, despite the rain. The butler confirms no visitor was announced after 10. Thorne cleared his throat. I was at my club. Holmes raised a hand. Your alibi holds, Mr. Thorne. You are innocent of murder, though you may yet answer for certain restorations. Motive links complete the structure, Holmes said. The Reynolds portrait concealed a hidden codicil to Lord Harrington's will, dated 1889, disinheriting any illegitimate issue and naming Reginald's sole heir. Mr. Lang, born Victor Harrington in Whitechapel, illegitimate son of the late Lord's brother, discovered this secret. Denied his claim, he arranged to steal and destroy the document. When Lord Harrington refused to part with the picture, murder followed. A shot at close range, pistol placed in the victim's hand, door locked from inside with the key returned to the pocket, suicide staged to mask the theft. Lang's shoulders slumped. A low sound escaped him. Holmes produced the codicil from his pocket, unfolding the yellowed parchment for all to see. Here is the final connecting link. The document itself, recovered from the portrait's hidden pocket. Every piece fits. Paint, mud, thread, ink scratches, timeline, witnesses, motive, and proof. Silence fell, broken only by the fire's crackle and the soft ticking of the mantel clock. Lang lifted his head at last. I did not intend murder, he struggled. The pistol went off. Lestrade stepped forward. That will be for the court, sir. The constables moved. Lang was led away without further resistance, chains clinking faintly down the hall. The room exhaled. Lady Harrington pressed a handkerchief to her eyes. Reginald stood and offered his hand to Holmes. You have saved our name, sir. Thorne and Baxter murmured thanks. Even Miss Voss nodded once, grudgingly. We returned to Baker Street late. The fire still burned. I tasted sweet brandy from the decanter, its warmth spreading as the rough tweed of my coat dried by the flames. Holmes paced slowly, pipe smoke curling upward. The chain is complete, he said quietly. No link missing, no forgery possible. I reflected in silence. Holmes's powers never ceased to astonish me. Looking back, I should have seen each segment slot into place sooner. The scent of old parchment lingered on my hands from the codicil. You, dear reader, may have already foreseen the final shape. Watson missed nothing by the end, did you? The link was there, from the first paint flake. Did you forge the entire chain before Holmes laid it out? What would you have built from these observations alone? The connection stands unbreakable now. Can you see it whole? Holmes counted every link, 8 in all. How many did you hold in mind? Before the final curtain, what does this complete chain tell you about justice and deception? The house grew quiet. Big Ben tolled midnight through the clear night air. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps had long since faded below. Every link accounted for. The chain complete. Chapter 8. Justice in Chains. As I set down the final acts of this remarkable affair, the last days of October brought a crisp clarity to London's air, the persistent fog having lifted at last to reveal gas lamps shining brighter and the chill wind carrying only the usual scent of coal smoke rather than damp oppression. At 221 B. Baker Street, the fire still burned warmly in the grate, its crackling a familiar comfort. Yet the room felt strangely quiet, now that the chase had ended. Holmes sat in his armchair, legs crossed, drawing thoughtfully upon his pipe, the rich tobacco smoke curling lazily toward the ceiling. The criminal is bound, Watson, he said quietly. Tonight, we witness justice close its shackles. I finished the last of my hot tea, its bitter warmth steadying me, and we departed once more in a hansom cab, the wheels rumbling steadily over the cobblestones toward Scotland Yard. The charge room at the Yard smelled strongly of carbolic soap and old stone, the air cold despite the small fire in the grate. Victor Lang stood in the center under the harsh gaslight, wrists secured by handcuffs that clinked softly whenever he shifted. His face was pale, the defiance of the previous night replaced by a hollow exhaustion. Inspector Lestrade stood beside him, notebook open, while two sergeants flanked the prisoner. Holmes and I entered quietly. Lang's eyes flicked toward us, then away. Lestrade cleared his throat. "Victor Lang, you are charged with the willful murder of Lord Harrington on the night of the 23rd of October, and with the theft of a valuable portrait belonging to the same. The evidence has been laid before the magistrate. You will be remanded until the assizes." Lang lifted his head slowly. "I didn't intend to kill him," he said, voice low and cracked. "He struggled for the picture. The pistol discharged. It was an accident." His words hung in the cold air. No one spoke for a long moment. The fire crackled faintly. Outside, a hansom cab's wheels clattered past on the wet street, followed by the distant toll of Big Ben marking the hour. Lestrade shook his head. "The jury will decide intent, sir." The pistol was placed in his hand, the door locked, the key returned to his pocket. Suicide was staged, coldly, deliberately. "That accident does not explain that." Lang's shoulders sagged further. He made no reply. The sergeant stepped forward, guiding him toward the cells. As he passed us, Lang paused briefly before Holmes. "You saw everything," he murmured. "Every link. I thought the portrait would protect me. Instead, it betrayed me." Holmes met his gaze without expression. "The ground remembers, Mr. Lang. So does canvas and parchment and mud. Observation defeats deception in the end." The cell door clanged shut behind him, the sound echoing down the stone corridor. Lestrade turned to us, rubbing his hands together. "A clean case, Holmes. The codicil, the paint fleck, the mud, the thread, all presented in court tomorrow. The Crown is grateful." We walked out into the night. The air felt fresher now, the gas lamps casting steady pools of light on the pavement, and rain had ceased entirely. Stars were visible in patches between the thinning clouds. I drew my coat closer against the chill, the rough tweed still carrying a faint trace of river mud from the chase. Back at Harrington House, the following morning, loose ends were tied with quiet efficiency. Lady Harrington received us in the drawing room, the fire burning low, the scent of polished wood and fading flowers in the air. Reginald stood beside her, steadier now. Elias Thorne arrived shortly after, hat in hand. "I supplied a restorer for minor work on the frame months ago," he admitted. Lang approached me later, asking for discretion. I refused involvement in anything illegal, but I should have spoken sooner. Holmes inclined his head. "Your scratch and your club alibi cleared you. Honesty now suffices." Clara Voss was summoned next. She entered stiffly, apron exchanged for a plain dress. "I bore a grudge," she said, "but I never touched the picture." Dr. Baxter, arriving last, confirmed once more his presence elsewhere that night. "No poison, no conspiracy," he stated simply. Holmes addressed them all. "The innocent stand cleared. Suspicion touched each of you briefly, yet the true chain excluded you. Motive, opportunity, and evidence point only one way." Lady Harrington spoke softly. "The portrait will be restored to its place above the mantel. The codicil stands. Reginald inherits as intended." Reginald nodded. "We owe you our future, Mr. Holmes." Thorne offered a modest reward for the painting's recovery. Holmes waved it aside. "Justice is reward enough." Scotland Yard's role concluded neatly that afternoon. Lestrade met us at the yard once more, papers in hand. The indictment is drawn. Lang will face trial at the Old Bailey next month. The evidence is ironclad. No weak links remain." He shook Holmes's hand firmly. "You've given us a textbook case, sir." We returned to Baker Street as dusk fell. The fire roared high again. I tasted sweet brandy from the decanter, its warmth spreading through me, while the rough weave of the armchair pressed comfortingly against my back. Holmes paced slowly before the hearth, pipe smoke drifting upward. "The criminal is bound," he said at last. "Every deception shattered, every innocent freed. Justice, in its slow but certain way, has served." I reflected quietly. Holmes's powers never ceased to astonish me. Looking back, the chain had tightened inexorably from the first turquoise flake to the clang of the cell door. The scent of carbolic from the yard still lingered faintly on my coat. You, dear reader, may have followed each step to this conclusion. Watson saw the end clearly at last. Did you? The link of justice held firm. Did you see it close around the guilty before the final clang? What chain would you have forged from the evidence alone? The connection is complete and unbreakable. Can you see the full circle now? Holmes counted no loose threads. How many did you find? Before the curtain falls, what does this binding tell you about truth prevailing over shadow? The house grew still. Big Ben tolled 9 through the clear evening air. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps sounded softly below as she prepared supper. The criminal bound, justice served. Chapter 9. Links restored. As I bring this narrative nearer its close, and the final week of October bestowed upon London a rare spell of clear, crisp weather. The persistent fog had vanished entirely, leaving the sky a pale wintry blue and the gas lamps shining with steady brilliance at dusk. Coal smoke still drifted from every chimney, yet the air felt lighter, the bitter chill tempered by occasional shafts of sunlight that glinted on the wet cobblestones. At 221 B. Baker Street, the fire burned with a cheerful crackle, its warmth spreading through the familiar room where chemical apparatus gleamed once more on the table and Holmes's Stradivarius rested quietly against the wall. The legal machinery moved swiftly. At the Old Bailey, Victor Lang's trial lasted but 3 days. The courtroom smelled of polished oak, old paper, and the faint carbolic trace that clung to the barrister's robes. The codicil was produced in evidence, its yellowed parchment unfolded before the jury under the judge's stern gaze. The turquoise paint flake, the Whitechapel mud specimen, the canvas thread, the telegram fragment, all were presented methodically by the Crown Prosecutor, each item handled with gloved care and placed on a baize-covered table where gaslight caught every detail. Lang sat in the dock, manacled, his face expressionless as witness after witness confirmed the chain Holmes had forged. The jury retired for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman pronounced the verdict: guilty of murder in the first degree. Sentence was passed. Death by hanging. Lang made no appeal. He merely nodded once and was led below. With the trial concluded, the innocent parties found their names and lives restored, and Reginald Harrington assumed the title and estates without dispute. At Harrington House, the portrait of his great-grandfather was rehung above the study mantel, its gilt frame polished, the hidden pocket now empty and sealed. Reginald invited us to witness the moment. The drawing-room fire crackled warmly. The air carried the scent of fresh beeswax and faint floral perfume from Lady Harrington's handkerchief. Reginald stepped forward, lifting the canvas carefully into place. "It no longer conceals a secret," he said quietly. "It simply honors the family as it always should have." Lady Harrington touched the frame lightly, her silk sleeve brushing the rough gilt. "Thanks to you, Mr. Holmes. The shadow has lifted. We may look forward again." Elias Thorne resumed his gallery business, unhindered. He called at Baker Street the following afternoon, hat in hand, to express gratitude. "I feared my name would be tarnished forever," he admitted, smoothing his waistcoat as he stood before the fire. "But your evidence cleared me completely. I have already received new commissions." Holmes inclined his head. "Truth restores what suspicion tarnishes, Mr. Thorne. Clara Voss, too, found peace. Dismissed under false accusation before the crime. She was quietly reinstated at Harrington House, at Lady Harrington's insistence. When we met her briefly in the servants' hall, the air smelled of fresh bread and carbolic from the scullery. She curtsied, stiffly. "I bore malice once," she said, "but justice has set matters right. I'll serve faithfully now." Dr. Baxter continued his practice in Harley Street without stain. His patients returned in greater numbers, reassured by the public clearing of his name. London itself seemed to breathe more easily. The streets bustled once more, with the familiar rhythm of hansom cabs clattering over cobblestones, street vendors calling their wares, and the distant chime of Big Ben marking the hours. The autumn leaves, swept clean by recent rains, lay in crisp piles along the curbs. Gas lamps flared brightly against the early dusk. In the parks, nursemaids pushed perambulators along gravel paths, their wheels crunching softly, while gentlemen in top hats strolled with canes tapping the ground. One evening, Holmes and I walked along the embankment. The Thames flowed steadily below, its surface reflecting the lights of passing barges. The air carried the clean, briny scent of river water mixed with distant coal smoke. Holmes drew upon his pipe, the tobacco glowing red in the bowl. "Order returns to the streets," he observed. "Deception is defeated. Truth reclaims its place. The chain that bound the guilty has also freed the innocent and restored balance to those it touched." I reflected quietly. Holmes's powers never ceased to astonish me. Looking back, every link, from the first turquoise flake to the final verdict, had served not merely to convict, but to liberate. The scent of beeswax from the restored portrait still lingered in my memory. You, dear reader, may have watched the restoration unfold, step by step. Watson saw the full circle complete. Did you? The link of restoration held firm. Did you see innocence rise as guilt fell? What chain would you now see binding past injustice to present justice? The connection stands clear and whole. Can you see the balance restored? Holmes counted no lingering shadows. How many did you dispel in your own mind? Before we turn the final page, what does this restoration tell you about the enduring power of observation and reason? The night deepened. Stars appeared above the river. We turned back toward Baker Street, footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. Mrs. Hudson had lit the lamps. Warm light spilled from our windows onto the street below. Order restored to London streets. Chapter 10. By the fire at Baker Street. The case of the stolen portrait had drawn to its quiet close, and November had settled over London with a gentle frost that silvered the rooftops and sharpened the air. At 221 B Baker Street, the coal fire burned with a steady, contented glow, casting warm shadows across the familiar clutter. Chemical apparatus neatly returned to its shelf, the Stradivarius resting in its open case, the Persian slipper bulging with fresh tobacco. Holmes lounged in his armchair, legs stretched toward the blaze, pipe in hand. I sat opposite, notebook closed at last, a glass of sweet brandy warming between my palms. Mrs. Hudson had just brought up a fresh pot of tea. Its steam rose in lazy curls, carrying the faint bitter scent that mingled pleasantly with the rich tobacco smoke drifting from Holmes's pipe. The room felt peaceful. The 17 steps below silent now that visitors had ceased. Outside, the night was clear, gas lamps shining steadily along Baker Street, the occasional clatter of a late hansom cab fading into distance. Holmes drew a long pull on his pipe and exhaled slowly. A satisfactory conclusion, Watson. The papers this morning carried the briefest notice. Convicted murderer, hanged at Pentonville. Justice served in Mayfair tragedy. No more, no less. The city has already moved on. I nodded, tasting the brandy's sweetness on my tongue. Yet, for us the chain remains vivid, from that first turquoise flake on the frame to the clang of the cell door, every link forged in reason. He smiled faintly, eyes reflecting the firelight. Precisely. The chain method, as I practice it, is nothing more than disciplined observation, linked by inexorable logic. Each clue is a link. The paint speck, the Whitechapel mud, the canvas thread, the hidden codicil. Alone they whisper, joined they bind. The forge is the reasoning that connects them. No guesswork, no intuition. Guess only data leading to data until the impossible is eliminated and truth alone remains. I leaned back, the rough tweed of the chair pressing comfortably against me. You make it sound mechanical, yet it is anything but. It is art as much as science. Holmes plucked a soft note on the violin strings with one hand, the sound humming low against the fire's crackle. Art and science are one when observation defeats deception. Consider the parallel of the scandal in Bohemia. Now, some years passed. There, a photograph hidden in a room seemed the entire mystery. Yet the chain was built from trifles. A servant's glance, a smoke rocket, a clergyman's haste, a woman's quick wit. Irene Adler outwitted the king, but she could not outwit the links I forged from those small observations. The photograph was recovered, not by force, but by seeing what others overlooked. So too here. The portrait was not merely stolen, it was the vault of a secret will. The ground beneath the window remembered the intruder's boots, the canvas remembered his touch, the parchment remembered the disinherited son's grievance. Deception thrives on the assumption that small things are insignificant. They are not. They are the chain itself. He set the violin aside and steepled his fingers beneath his chin. The science of deduction rests on this principle. When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. In the Harrington case, we eliminated suicide by the angle of the wound and the staged pistol. We eliminated Reginald by his verified absence, Lady Harrington by her innocent midnight errand, Thorne by his club alibi and innocent scratch, Voss by her unrelated telegram, Baxter by his confinement attendance. Link by link, the field narrowed until only Lang remained. Motive, opportunity, means, all accounted for. The chain tightens, not by magic, but by relentless exclusion and connection. I sipped my brandy again, its warmth spreading pleasantly. And yet the method requires patience. Most men see only the surface, the locked door, the missing picture, and accept the obvious. You see the links beneath. Holmes nodded. Most men observe superficially. I observe minutely. The difference is everything. A flake of paint no larger than a pinhead, a thread caught on a cuff. These are not accidents. They are signatures. The criminal forgets that the world retains memory. Earth clings to souls, pigment adheres to tools, paper tears and folds in telltale ways. Reason forges the connections. The chain binds the guilty and frees the innocent. The fire popped softly. Big Ben tolled the hour, its deep note carrying clearly through the still night. Holmes reached for the Persian slipper, replenishing his pipe. Why does observation defeat deception? Because deception depends on misdirection, on directing attention to the dramatic while concealing the mundane. The murderer stages a suicide in a locked room to create impossibility. We look not at the impossibility, but at the minute betrayals that make it possible. The science lies in refusing to be distracted. Data, data, data. Let the chain form, link by link, and the truth emerges of its own accord. I set my glass down. You have taught me that, Holmes. Each case strengthens the lesson. He smiled, a rare, genuine expression. And you, then, my dear Watson, record it faithfully so that others may learn. The chain method is not mine alone. It is open to any who will train eye and mind to see. The room grew quieter still. Outside, a light frost had begun to form on the window panes, etching delicate patterns in the gaslight's glow. Holmes leaned back, pipe glowing. Until the next puzzle presents itself, dear listener, observe keenly, question everything, and let no detail escape you. The world is full of chains waiting to be forged, some binding evil, some restoring order. The game, as ever, continues. I rose to draw the curtains against the night. The fire crackled on, a steady heartbeat in the room. Holmes plucked one final soft note on the violin. It lingered in the air like a promise. Until the next chain forges, dear listener, the game continues.